Welcome to the Author's Porch, where every good conversation happens. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride from author to author. We want to give you an experience where you learn and enjoy the conversation. Authors tell you about their journey, you learn about new books, and at the end of the day, you go home with a smile on your face because the Author's Porch is a beacon of light, bringing you home to the family you never knew you had. We hope that you enjoy the show. Everybody, welcome to the Author's Porch, where every great conversation happens. Tonight, we are blessed and favored to have Jass Aujla here on the show with us tonight. How are you doing, Jass?
I'm great, CJ. How are you?
I'm doing good. A lot better than I was this morning. I went live this morning and I was just trying to get my life together, honestly.
No.
Yeah,
Was it
so I
technical
am.
difficulties? Was it technical difficulties?
It was technical inside of my own head and trying to just wake up in the morning. You know, do you have those days where you're just like, "Ugh, I just can't"?
I felt that. I felt that this morning. Yeah, I often feel that most mornings. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I work. I've got my author life, but then I've also got my full-time job that pays the bills, and we're just coming out of the COVID years and back in the office, and so I'm, I go into the office 3 times a week. And today was a little bit of a struggle where I was like, do I really need to be in the office? And I was like, oh, yeah, I promised someone I would go for coffee at 4 o'clock. And I wonder if I can cancel. But then I was like, you know what? I made a commitment and I'm just going to go with it and get out of bed. So I feel you.
Yes. Yes, definitely. I do work a full-time job on top of my podcasting, event stuff, and authoring. And but I work from home. I'm very, very blessed to still work from home with my full-time job. I could not go into an office. So thank you for going into an office because I would not be able to do it. I'm not equipped anymore to go and do all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot for people to do that grind as well as write those books. And I see your book there. I saw the cover of that book and I'm like, that's definitely a thriller. Oh my goodness. And I read the synopsis. So before we jump right into this conversation, because I'm excited to talk to you, I watched a couple of your interviews on nationwide news channels. I was like, yes, yes, she is getting it. I'm going to give the people just a little bit of background on you so they can learn more and get into this conversation with us. So Jass is coming to us. She is a Canadian South Asian author of suspense thriller fiction. And whenever she's not writing those great novels, she's also writing poetry and prose. Uh, Guys, she has a great novel that she has written, and she's currently touring around getting this novel out there, Next of Twin, which, oh, guys, this when I was reading about the synopsis of it, I was like, okay, separated at birth. Okay, look at this. This is where did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start and say thank you for having me on the show. So Next a Twin, actually, interesting enough, began as a 10-page submission to a writing retreat that I attended in 2018, and the task was to write 10 pages, and the retreat. The host of the retreat was going to give me feedback on the first 10 pages. And, interesting enough, the reason why I was I was actually attending the retreat. In late 2017, I got promoted at work, and we talked about, having the day job, and it was a promotion that I actually didn't think was going to happen. And so when it did happen, I was like, I need to do something, different, something big but something for myself. And normally, when I would get promoted or, I would get a bonus at work, I'd usually spend it on a handbag. I'm going to admit that's like sort of like, my passion, my what's it called?
We
The
all
downfall. Yeah.
think,
Guilty
we all have a
pleasure.
thing.
Yeah, and so and so instead of, purchasing a handbag, I said, I need to do something for myself. And one of the things that always has played a big part in my life is writing. And I decided, you know what, I am going to attend a writing retreat. I am going to book something. And so when I booked it in late 2017, it actually wasn't going to happen for a year out. And I was kind of like, oh, I want to go on it right now and celebrate before I start the job. But then it's interesting because I feel like the universe just, it has a mind of its own, and it has a greater
Yeah.
plan. And so for me, it was like, well, yeah, I know you're excited about it, but you're gonna, you're gonna spend the year getting ready for the retreat. And so when Vanessa, the retreat organizer, said, okay, 10 pages set, you have a few months, you don't need to send them to me until like, March. And I was going to go in September of 2018. And at first it was really overwhelming. I was like, I haven't written 10 pages of anything in like forever. Like, how am I going to write this? And one of the things, and so one of the things with being promoted at work meant that I was actually going to have to commute, and commute into the city. I live currently, in the suburbs, and commuting into city was meaning that was going to be about almost up to an hour of travel time on the train. And I was really adamant that that commute time is really my own personal time. And I, in a way, made a commitment to myself that, I'm going to use that time to make progress on a goal that was personal to me, and not spend it on work emails or spend it on my work laptop, because frankly, the company's not paying me for that. And that's my
Right?
personal time. And so that is like literally how I wrote the first 10 pages. And then when I first started writing, those 10 pages basically grew to about 50. And so, by the time I went on the retreat in September, I had about, 50 pages. And that's kind of how Next to Twin started. Funny enough, it wasn't the original title I had in mind for the book. But, things happened, and it ended up being Next to Twin. And yeah.
Can you share with us the original title, or is that not allowed? I know when you
Oh,
publish things,
yeah.
sometimes you can't.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because the original title was The Girl in the Mirror. And
Ah,
when you read the book, the first scene is about one of the twins looking in the mirror, and she's got a photo of her, her sibling, her sister, and she's comparing.
mhm.
And so that, in a way, it originally sort of tied into like the beginning actually tied into the end. And so the title was The Girl in the Mirror. When I was originally sort of researching and seeing what kind of titles were out there, I had, I knew that The Girl in the Mirror was a title that seemed to be very popular. But when I kind of dug deeper, and I was like, okay, well, The Girl in the Mirror, nobody else, no other author. Okay, yes, some other authors are using the same title, but the title seems to, or the book seems to be a little bit older. So at least there's this
Yeah.
a time gap within my novel, or by the time my novel would get into market, and the premise is different than all the others,
Right.
and so I was like, well, I'm gonna stick with that title. But then I think in like 2021, when I was, I had written I had written the first draft, I had edited, and and I think in 2021 in the summer, one of my good friends, Christine, she sent me like this ad or something, and she was just like, "This is strange. Look at this," and it was basically a novel titled "The Girl in the Mirror." And it was about twin sisters, and it was about the twin sisters conning each other. It was a suspense thriller, and it was a book that was written by, I think, an Australian author, and I was just like, oh my god, like what the.
No.
I wouldn't say, I used other words, but but this is
You
a family
probably, yeah.
station, so I will say heck. And yeah, I was really, as an author, it was one of those moments where I was just like, what the heck? What do I was really upset. And looking back at it, I can really laugh, but I remember in the moment I was really, really upset for a number of days. I think even up to the point where my daughter had at one point, because she knew me and my partner, like it was telling my partner about it, and I probably was really, really down for a few days where I was just like, I don't want to look at my
Oh,
book. I don't want to see anything. I just don't want to even socialize. I don't want to talk. And she at one point,
oh,
my partner had said something to her, and then he's like, oh, like, what's going on? And she was just like, and she was kind of like, well, I've heard like upsetness and weirdness, and and she kind of was like, well, she's like, do you have cancer? And I'm like, no. No. And she was just like, well, then
oh,
what
bless.
is what she's like, what the heck is wrong with you? And it was a little bit of a reality moment for me as well, because I'm like, you know what, I think maybe I'm overreacting. And sometimes at work we call it first world problems, because it's you tend
Yeah.
to take blow things out of proportion, but also take the fact that, hey, you wrote a book, and hey, you're like almost like at that point where you've been accepted by a publisher, and you're going to get into market. And what if somebody has the same title and almost the same premise, and you'll move on. And yeah. And so it's interesting, because it really took me sort of away from like, hey, you know what, because the title at that point was really, really, like, really close to me, because it was almost sometimes when I write, even if it's like a short story, if it's a poem, sometimes the title comes to me first, and then the rest of it just comes
Mm,
after, right? And so next to Twin, when it was called The Girl in the Mirror, was kind of
yeah.
like that as well. And so it almost made me have to go back to a point where I had to get creative again, and I had to take a step back and be like, well, what's my story really about? And come up with
Right.
a few different titles. Interesting enough, because I think that there aren't a lot of whole lot of titles for novels that aren't taken. And so even coming up with
True.
a different title that hasn't already been taken is really, really hard. And so I came up with a few options, and my friend Christine, we workshopped between us, and a couple of my other friends, we kind of workshopped a few different ideas, and yeah, and so Next to Twin was kind of like the runner up, and at that time there was no other book that called Next to Twin, so that was a positive sign as well.
Like
Yeah,
accurate. I think
yeah,
that you identified so closely with it as well. I mean, I think as authors, we grab it, and it is our book's identity, kind of like our
yeah,
names. And reading in your bio and reading and listening to some of your other interviews, as well as reading an article that you wrote, you had wanted to be a writer very early in life, but you was guided towards going to more in the business world because you needed to have that foundation behind you first so that your parents knew that you would be okay if
yeah,
if the artistic thing didn't work out, which I think all parents, I've got 2 kids in college, and I told them, "Just get a foundation and then do whatever you want after the foundation." I think all parents are, wanting our children, so I understand that want your baby to be, and then having to figure it out later. So that's definitely that ache in your heart.
yeah.
Now I have to find the identity of my child now.
Yeah,
So
I was actually talking to a friend, and we were talking about kids, and the way the way I kind of look at it when I was young, and when you're young, you have this idealist view of life and what you want out of life, and what you imagine yourself for in the future. And when I was young, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be married. I'm going to be a writer. That is going to be my career. And I'm going to have 4 kids, and 2 of them are going to be twins. And and sometimes I look at that and I'm like, well, it kind of came true. I've got 2 kids, and 2 beautiful kids. They're a little bit older, and I've got my 2 twins from my book, from my book babies.
that's
So
true.
yeah, yeah,
You created them exactly the way you wanted them to be in your
yeah,
book. So
yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you always set out to write the thriller? Or was it
Well,
another genre that you kinda thought you would always write?
yeah, so I kind of fell in love. So maybe just to back up a little bit. So I was born in India, and I migrated to Canada when I was 2, in the early 70s with my parents. And as a child of immigrant parents, life was tough. But as a child, I loved reading, and in a way, just the English language was, it was almost like my secret language, because my parents, being new into the country, they didn't speak English very, very well. They got by, and yeah, and so with me, it was like, well, I am going to read, and they don't know what I'm reading. And so it was almost like, having your own secret. And so,
Yeah,
and because they work very hard. I found a lot of alone time. And so, the way I would pass that time was reading and getting lost in other stories. And so I grew up reading Judy Blume, Sidney Sheldon, and all those great authors, that I'm sure
yeah,
kids today probably were like, "Who is that?" But the greats, in my eyes, the greats. And
yes.
when I was when I was 8, and if you've listened to some of my other podcasts or my other stories, when I was 8, one of my teachers came up with a school project, and it was basically to write a short story, and put it in a book format. And so what we were supposed to bring in. We were supposed to bring in cardboard, cloth, and then basically we made books, and they were like empty books, and then we were supposed to fill them up with our stories. And so the story that I ended up writing was, funny enough, a mystery, and it was about two kids and a missing cat, and how the kids save the day with with the missing cat. And funny enough, that story won me an award, won the school prize,
Wow.
and I was sent on a Canadian a young writers conference. And when I entered that room at that conference, and I'm like 8 years old, and I mean, this is how I remember it. I don't even know how. Like, it's funny because you
That's
remember
fact.
things when
If that's how you
yeah,
remembered it, that's how it went.
yeah, yeah. And I stepped in the room, and I was like just wowed. And I'm like, this is what
Wow.
I'm doing for the rest of my life. I found my calling.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I the rest of, like, elementary and high school, just loved writing. In high school, I grew up in Winnipeg, so it's like one province in Canada, and I lived there. It's like, we call it the prairie provinces. It was very cold growing up, and then when I was about 16, 17, we moved to Ontario, and that was like a province over where it was a little bit milder weather. And yeah, and I think Winnipeg is also in the central time zone, with maybe from where you are, and then we went into
Mhm.
the Eastern time zone, and so continued in high school to to study creative writing, and then when it was time to apply for universities, I had applied to a very prestigious journalism program, and it was very competitive to get into. You had to have like a portfolio of different types of your writings. I had published a couple of like articles in our local newspaper. I had a couple of poetry
Wow.
pieces, short story pieces, and and again, it was just really competitive, and I got accepted, and I was thrilled. Out of the three universities that I applied for, I had gotten into all three universities, but I really just had my heart set on that one university. And when it came time to tell my parents and look for their support, and and their funding, my dad, who was sort of the decision maker in the household, kind of looked at the three acceptance letters, and I think the other two were like more business programs. And I
Yeah.
said, well, Dad, I really want to go, and really want to go to Ryerson, and do journalism. And he kind of looked at it, and he was just like, journalism? He's like, what is journalism? And then he kind of paused, and he said, he's like, he's like, is that reading the news on the TV? And he was just like, no daughter of mine is reading the news on the TV.
Yeah.
And and at the time, I was just like, I was mortified. I was like, but I want to do it. I want to do it. And he was like, well, I'm paying the bill. You're going to this school. And the university was local. And he's like, you're going to this university, and that's it. There's no conversation. And and so I ended up going to the University of Toronto, and doing a double major in economics and industrial relations. And every chance I could get, I studied the creative writing courses. My dad would at some point look at my report card and be like, what is this ENG, or what is this literary, or what is this Canadian fiction? And I'd be like, well, Dad, I just need it. I just need to take these courses. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
so it was, yeah, so it was, a long story short, it was, somehow kept the passion going. I do, sometimes
Yeah.
they say, sometimes between my friends, we'll sometimes muse and be like, well, if you could change just one thing about your life, if you just go back one time and change one decision, or just change one thing, what it be? And for a long time, I had said, yeah, that was that one decision. I wish that, if I could change one thing in my life, I would just give my younger self a little bit of more courage to say, you know what, this is what I want to do, and I'm standing up for it. Yeah, and so I kind of held that regret for a really, really long time. Um, but I think in a way, just kind of flash forward to the future, and where things come sort of full circle, that moment where I bought myself that trip to go to Italy and go on a writing retreat, and pursue my own sort of passion, was sort of like that full circle, and
Yeah.
moment to say, you this is your second chance, and just see it through. And yeah.
Yeah. That was you giving yourself permission. And I love that you wrote that story early on in life, where it was your mystery story won that award. And in middle school was where I found my passion as well. And I wrote but it was a scary story. And it's funny because I don't write scary stories now. And I'm going, well, maybe I should have.
Yeah.
And you talked about Sydney Sheldon and Judy Blume, and do you know that they're about to release her movie? Dear God, are you there? It's me, Margaret.
Yeah. Yeah.
The movie's about to come out, and I watched last night. I watched her documentary, Judy Blume Forever, and it was a documentary
Yeah.
about Judy Blume's life, which I watched it last night, and I just had this profound feeling of awness about everything that she said and how she lived her life as a woman and as an author and the stories that she wrote. And I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the legacy you want to leave behind, that you went for it.
Yeah.
That even though she had to live a traditional lifestyle, I did as well. You
Yeah.
had to live a certain way before you were able to follow your dream, that you still went for it, that you still gave
Yeah.
yourself permission. You didn't wait for someone
Yeah.
else to. And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful cycle, that you never let the dream fade away, that you still went
Yeah.
for it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
And I feel very
I
blessed.
love
I
that.
feel, yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to see. They turned it into a movie, correct? They turned
They
Judy Blume's.
did. Dear,
Yeah.
are you there, God?
Okay.
It's me, Margaret. It's
Yeah.
coming
Okay.
out
Yeah.
very soon. I've been watching Good
Okay.
Morning America live with Kelly and Mark and The View and everybody, and Judy
Yeah.
Blume's been doing her rounds. And just to
Yeah.
see her, and it was so sad because Beverly Cleary passed away, I think last year or the year before, at
Yeah.
103. And we never got to really know Beverly Cleary that way because we didn't get that documentary. And Judy Blume's 83, and watching her documentary, and she was writing a lot of the children that wrote to her. And one
Yeah.
girl actually invited her to her college graduation, who they wrote back and forth for many years. And Judy Blume
Wow.
and her husband went to her college graduation, and I
Oh
thought,
my God.
I want Judy Blume to come visit me. That's the
Me
power
too.
of, right?
Yeah.
That's the power of
Yeah.
an author's voice. The books that
Yeah.
you write, the stories that you bring alive, and talking on podcasts like this, you're giving someone else that permission. You're showing them that they don't have to let go of their dream. Your story
Yeah.
becomes your testimony of that grit, that
Yeah.
determination, that beautiful power that you hold within yourself. And it's beautiful. And thank you for sharing tonight, because I got this whole, after watching her documentary last night and talking to you and hearing how when you got that promotion, I read about it, and then you telling me about it, and I was like, I love that. You says, I'm going to book me a writer's retreat That's my gift to myself, promotion, because
Yeah.
usually we take our family out or we do something for somebody else with our promotion, and you did that. It's amazing. So where can people grab your book, Next of Twin, if they want to grab a copy of it and learn more about the twins who are trying to con each other?
Yeah, so it's being published through Spark Press. So it is available and will be available May 16th. And I'm not sure when this show is or episode will be on your podcast and go live. So it's just a few weeks out, and it will be available
Yeah.
on or is available on Amazon right now for pre-order, but also Barnes and Nobles. If you're in Canada, for my Canadian friends, it's available through Indigo, and my official book launch event is going to be at Indigo, one of our local stores in Mississauga.
Very cool. And do you have a website people can go and follow you and your author career? Because I have an inkling that this isn't your last book.
Yeah, I do. It is my name, www.jassaujla.com. And yeah, and so when you go on the landing page, you'll see Next to Twin, and then I hope folks will explore the site as well. There's like you said, there's we've got our press page with all my past interviews, just promoting Next to Twin, as well as the other anthology poetry anthologies that I've been very grateful and lucky to be a part of as well.
Very cool. So May 16th, Next of Twin will be released, but it's currently up for pre-order, and you will be at local store. You will be at Indigo locally, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And you'll be doing tours around different places, but they can go on your website to find out where you'll be at next.
Absolutely. And yeah, if folks go on to the events page, you can find all my listings there.
Awesome. Well, Jass, I've had an absolute wonderful time learning about your journey from being born in India, migrating to Canada with your parents. The journey of an author is so multifaceted, and yours is a beautiful story of saying, I'm not going to give up on this dream. I'm going to continue. And May 16th, everyone's going to get to read this wonderful story and explore the mind of an author who is giving herself permission to never give up on a dream.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, CJ, on the show. It's really a great pleasure to meet you.
It was a pleasure to meet you as well. And hopefully when you publish your next book, you'll come back as well. Guys, thanks for being here with us tonight. We hope you will be here with us in May. We are having shows back to back and all over the place. We're jam-packing them in May because I'll be taking a weeks-long vacation when my sister comes down and visits. Don't forget to check out our blog interviews because they're going up every single day. We've got a lot of things happening with the Author's Porch, and in May you'll be able to start submitting for the magazine. You'll be able to nominate your book to be on the cover. We're doing specific genres for May. We're going to be doing different books. Just come back and see all the wonderful authors. Find your next favorite author, because that's what we want to do here on the Author's Porch. Everybody have a great evening. We will see you next week. Bye, everybody. Bye, Jass.
Bye.
Bye.